when I was disconnected. So I want to connect back to the screen before we begin.
Oh, I
Okay.
apologize. We are live.
Oh, okay. Oh, hello everyone.
I'm gonna click back to slides.
Welcome. Welcome to Belkasoft's webinar on artificial intelligence in the field of digital forensics. Thank you for joining. I'm sure that you can guess the answer to the question that serves as the topic of today's talk. So you are here for another reason, to learn more about the artificial intelligence technology and to see with your own eyes how it can be successfully applied in the field of digital forensics and cyber incident response. My name is Helena Chertova. I'm a researcher and technical content developer at Belkasoft. Our company produces tools for extracting and analyzing data for electronic devices. Besides helping accelerate routine tasks in the digital forensics lab, our flagship tool, Belkasoft X, offers advanced features like mobile passcode brute force and now BelkaGPT, which is an AI assistant for digital investigations. Implementing artificial intelligence in the digital investigation workflow is a big leap for the industry, and Belkasoft is at the forefront of enabling users to explore its potential. Okay, let's see what we are going to discuss today. So, I will cover the key concepts and mechanisms behind large language models, which is one of today's most buzzing AI technologies. And we will look into the way to implement it in digital forensics. As an example, I'm going to demonstrate how BelkaGPT helps discover and interpret digital evidence. So, first things first, I would like to give you a quick refresher on the key concepts behind artificial intelligence, because AI is a broad field and it embraces many technologies. But at its core, it revolves around creating systems that can usually perform tasks that involve human intelligence, like recognizing objects and speech, reading, writing, making assumptions and predictions, and the like. I remember when in school, I was struck by a fact that our computer science teacher told us a computer could not distinguish between a cat and a dog. How come? I thought. It can do such cool stuff as games and, pie charts in Excel. But telling a cat from a dog? A task that was so easy for a human brain and it was impossible for a computer in the 90s. And that was because at that time machines relied mostly on programming. And writing a program that would explain a machine all the differences between our beloved pets was a complex endeavor. It was also inefficient. However, it was efficient to create algorithms that that would let computers find patterns in data on their own. And that's what's called machine learning. For more complicated tasks like learning patterns in unstructured data, like images and text, machine learning employs neural networks. And this is a cornerstone technology in artificial intelligence nowadays. A neural network is a mathematical model that processes data through functions called neurons. It performs complex calculations to define the features and patterns in data and generate predictions or decisions based on the learned patterns. As neural networks are organized in layers that may go very deep, this process is called deep learning. Deep learning requires high computing capacity, and it became possible thanks to the evolution of processing units. And this finally enabled computers to recognize cats, dogs, and many other objects. So, neural networks have been long part of digital forensics tools, including Belkasoft X, and they are used to help automatically detect and categorize images of interest, like those including faces, guns, pornography, and so on. Deep learning has also made language models possible, large language models possible, and we are here to talk about them. So, what do we know about large language models? By now, you have heard the word model a few times. So, let's take a moment to define it. So, a model is a simplified representation of a real life phenomenon, and it is used in many fields. Models can be abstract or physical, and their purpose is to help us understand or predict the behavior of the original. But how can you model something as complex and multifaceted as a human language? How can you encode its structures and nuances for a computer to understand? Well, it takes a huge amount of text, a large neural network, and many training iterations. So here I drew a simplified workflow of the training process. First, the large language models split the input text into smaller units, such as words, expressions, symbols, and so on. Then, the model analyzes the structures and patterns in the text to determine the relationship between those units. So, deep learning neural networks. And as a result, it encodes text units into arrays of numbers. These numbers are called embeddings. And these embeddings capture the meaning and other properties of text units. For example, the embeddings of the verbs to use and to utilize will be very similar because these words are not exactly synonyms, but they have similar meanings. At the same time, the word blue will have two different embedding sets as it has two meanings that depend on the context. So training on large text datasets allows LLMs to learn many different contexts and establish a versatile model of human language. And when the training phase is complete, the language model can do natural language processing tasks by performing various calculations with the embeddings. For example, for text generation, an LLM calculates the probability of the next word based on a previous sequence. It uses a new input, for instance, a task or a question, as the initial sequence, and predicts the new words in the sequence one by one. During the whole process, it takes into account both the input and all the subsequently added words. Some call this process autocomplete on steroids. It is notable, though, that many LLMs inject randomness into output generation to improve their performance. And this means that they rarely produce exactly the same answer to a query. Okay, memes starting. Maybe you'll have some fun now. So, when talking about LLMs, we usually think of ChatGPT. It was the first to become so easily accessible to the public and quickly gained momentum for its very human-like outputs. As a content developer, I was super excited to try it out when it was first released. And to be honest, my first experience was a bit disappointing. Back then, I was writing an article about the Transport Layer Security Protocol version 1.3. It is important, the version. And I had learned quite a lot about it. When I asked ChatGPT to explain how it worked to me, its reply contained many inconsistencies. And these inconsistencies were partly a mixture of information about the older versions of the same protocol. That's how I learned that LLMs can be very good at creating texts, but the contents of these texts aren't necessarily valid. The thing is, ChatGPT was trained on a very large dataset that included code libraries, books, scientific papers, blog posts, and even internet conversations. That is why it learned different contexts, and typically it does not mix them unless you ask it. but it may not be as good with the details, especially if the text data relating to a certain topic was scarce in the training dataset. Yeah, ChatGPT significantly advanced since our first encounter and turned into a multimodal LLM, meaning it can process various sources like speech, media files, and perform an extended set of tasks. But if we talk about an average language model, it is usually good at such tasks as creating human-like text based on prompts, providing answers to questions, though not always valid, but still it generates very good and human-like answers. Then it can condense long texts into shorter summaries while retaining the main points, which is a very, very useful functionality. So then it can determine the sentiment or emotional tone of a text and perform many other tasks that people just invent because they usually get creative when they get to play around with new technologies. But how does it all help in digital forensics and incident response? As we already know, LLMs were initially designed for natural language processing tasks. So the first thing that comes to mind is writing reports. Indeed, an LLM can quickly craft a meticulously structured document if you provided the data you want to include in it and explain the structure that you want to get. What else? If the LLM is trained on code libraries, it can help you write scripts for parsing raw data from device images. But if you went further and added your case data to the LLM training dataset, it could do so much more, like summarize conversations, pinpoint the topics of interest, analyze sentiment in the messages and in emails. It would be like a fellow investigator who has read all the text-based data in your case and is there to give you quick insight. But yeah, it is not that easy to use an LLM in digital forensics investigations because feeding your data to an online LLM is risky. Online models can use the information you provide for further training. And this data may actually show up in the queries of other users trying to solve a similar problem. For digital forensics experts who typically deal with sensitive data, it is not an option at all. Next, the hardware requirements for an average offline LLM can be a no-go for many digital forensics labs. When generating replies, LLMs perform numerous complex calculations, as you already know, which is often can only be supported by graphic processing units with larger memory. And these, as you know, too, costs quite a lot. And even if you find a lightweight model to implement, deploying it locally requires specialized knowledge and skills, and it can take a lot of time. The last problem is something we have already discussed, the problem of hallucinations. LLMs may seem very intelligent, but there are limits to this. They get the context, sentiment, semantic aspects, and other features of the text, but they can misinterpret information. And since LLMs are programmed to generate the next word in the sequence no matter what, they just can't say no, I don't know. Instead, they continue to synthesize the words and notions from the available training data, but they do not validate if they are true. And the data being true is very important for digital investigations. And for example, not such a long time ago, there was a widely covered story of an attorney who tried to defend a client by referencing non-existing cases. How this happened? Well, these cases were totally made up by ChatGPT, while the attorney was sure that it was a search engine. Pretty reckless, right? Um, enters BelkaGPT. Yeah, we are here to discuss it today. Belkasoft engineers had all the challenges I mentioned in mind when designing BelkaGPT, and the good news is they were able to solve them. BelkaGPT is an AI assistant built into Belkasoft X and powered by Belkasoft X's artifact extraction. It analyzes your case data and relies on it to generate replies. This approach helps to minimize hallucinations. If the Belkasoft LLM cannot find data relevant to your query, it admits this fact and does not invent anything. Along with the answer, BelkaGPT shows the three most relevant artifacts. This approach helps you immediately validate the generated reply. Needless to say that being part of Belkasoft X, BelkaGPT can work in an offline environment and it processes all your data locally. You do not need to worry that sensitive information from your case can be used for further training of the LLM or can leak in a data breach. And lastly, Belkasoft engineers optimized all BelkaGPT processes so that you could run it on an average digital forensic workstation. Obviously, machines with discrete graphic processing units show better performance, but it can as well work on CPU only and generate replies within less than a minute. This time, of course, depends on the CPU capacity. So now we are going to see it in action. Oh, I'm sharing my screen. And I have Belkasoft X open. And each time you want to analyze something, you begin by adding a data source. So here I will select add existing mobile image, and here it is. Then there are some preliminary options. I click next. And here is where I select the artifact types and artifacts to analyze. So as you can see, Belkasoft X supports many artifact categories like that are usually of interest for the investigation, like browsers, chats, documents, files, mails, pictures, of course, and system files that often contain some important information too. So I keep all the artifacts selected and click next. So these are the settings that we don't need. Here is the media tab, and this is where you can select the options to run AI recognition of images and categorize them. So you can select such categories as guns, faces, text. When you select text, it does not only detect that there is text on the images, of course, it also recognizes the text and adds it to your data source. So we click next. And here it is, the BelkaGPT tab with the one and only checkbox, which is to enable data processing data with BelkaGPT. And we click next. You can see the summary of the selections that we made. And at this point, I would click complete, but actually, of course, we do not have all this time. So I will just go back to an analyzed case. It says and with errors, but it doesn't mean that there were errors, some errors that could affect all the data, just maybe some minimal things. And if you hover over this sign, you can, over this icon, you can see that BelkaGPT was enabled during the analysis. So then we go to the tasks window. see that the tasks completed successfully, and go to the artifacts window to see all the extracted artifacts in our data source. So there are some Telegram chats, WhatsApp, some emails. What's next? Let's go to the BelkaGPT window and ask it something. As you may see, I have a long previous conversation with it. And I have a pre-configured question. I'll just paste it in the window. Other mentions of forgery. You can't see it very well. And now we wait. While we wait, I would like to tell you some things about the language model, like about BelkaGPT. So since it is a large language model, it primarily focuses on the artifact types containing text data. These are documents, emails, SMS, chats, notes, calendar events, file names and metadata, and it also covers drone data and a range of Windows-specific artifacts that are used by cyber incident responders, like remote connections, timeline events, prefetch files, and so on. Another interesting thing that it does is that you remember that task that we run for picture categorization, and if it detects pictures that belong to certain categories, like we can find here, so it will also know that such picture categories is available, and it can reply to questions about them. Look, it has generated the reply. Yeah, I need also to mention that this machine is running on a GPU, not very large memory, but still this affects how fast it generates the replies. So here is my reply. Are there mentions of forgery? So Belkasoft replies, yes, the mention of forgery is present in the text. The description of imitation systems, the mention of people trying to imitate their partners' signatures on their school reports, parents' signatures on their school reports, are indicative of the concept of forgery. Ok, furthermore, the question dove posso trovare un buon falsificatore explicitly asks for finding a good forger. And here it is. It could detect 3 sources that included mentions of forgery. So these are a message, a picture, and a note file. We can now look at all these artifacts and go to the artifacts window to see them. So here it is. It's important to note here that BelkaGPT recognized text in Italian and was able to translate it. So there is some message in Telegram that includes text about forgery. Now, here is a note. Let's go inspect this note. And it looks like, so the properties window show this better, the text. And it looks like it's something similar to what we saw in the message. Okay, here is another artifact. So this is a picture, surprisingly. Now, of course, not surprisingly, because text recognition was on and BelkaGPT was able to read this text. So what is it about? Okay. Well, this is actually some screenshot of a conversation, and This conversation mentions a guy who can make a fake ID. So this is also the concept of forgery. And in fact, even though Belkasoft didn't mention it in its reply, okay, let's close it. You can, sorry. So the fact that Belkasoft didn't mention it in its reply, but still it could detect the source that included this topic. So you may be wondering now what else it is good for. Okay, there are many other things that it is good at, but I'm not going to demonstrate all of them real life, but you will see them in the slide. Um, at this point, I would say that we would characterize BelkaGPT as keyword search on steroids because it is very good at discovering topics that are of interest in a case. The range of these topics is infinite, like human relationships, money transfers, phishing emails, events, you name it. But when you use keywords, there is always a possibility of missing some important ones, while the large language models looks for notions and associations that comprise a large variety of words. BelkaGPT works similarly to human intellect, helping find signs and hints. For example, it may know that what may be considered suspicious and can detect indications of such behavior. So here is an example of the answer it generated when I asked it if there were some suspicious topics mentioned in chat. It is another data source, but it seems like it has a reference to the same fake ID conversation. So it was able to find several occurrences of suspicious behavior. Someone trying to discuss a sensitive matter and like the fake ID guy, and it says that these conversation seem suspicious. So pretty impressive, right? So what else? Like the next one is about financial transactions, which is also often an important topic of many investigations. Here, it was able to detect a message that stated a payment of made in Bitcoin and explained that the payment of a certain number of BTC means that it was made in Bitcoin. Next, relationships. Yeah, relationships is also are also a very important topic in many investigations because lovers are usually considered the first suspect. And here it answers a question about the signs of romantic relationships in the data source. So it did find some signs and explains which what these signs are and of course shows the three most relevant artifacts which you can always quickly jump to and read the whole conversation and validate whether BelkaGPT's assumption was right or wrong. So here is another interesting example. It's about picture metadata. How remember I mentioned before that BelkaGPT captures file metadata, and here I ask whether there were pictures made with iPhone 8. So you know that many pictures include the information about the locations and the cameras they were made with. So I tried to pinpoint them. and it replies that it couldn't find any pictures made with the model of the iPhone I asked about, but still, it mentions that there were pictures made with another model, which is a good result as well. How to talk to BelkaGPT? Obviously, to get such insightful answers from a language model, you need to know how to ask questions. If you have read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy book or watched the movie, you may remember that a clear question is very important when talking to artificial intelligence. For those who haven't, here's the short story. There was a supercomputer called Deep Thought. It was designed to find the answer to the ultimate question of life, universe, and everything. And it took the computer 7.5 million years to calculate it. Well, the answer was the answer was 42. Thankfully, today's non-fiction large language models provide more expected answers, but even though they may show human intelligence, you shouldn't be fooled by this fact. For now, they only mimic it. The best way to communicate with a computer is still give it clear instructions. In the realm of the large language models, these instructions are called prompts. Some language models, like ChatGPT, can be configured with natural language prompts, and others have pre-configured prompts that kind of outline their functionality. So BelkaGPT has a pre-configured prompt, which is to answer your question based on case data and provide reasoning behind it. Yeah, sorry. Our AI assistant is very work focused and you won't be able to chit chat with it while drinking your morning coffee. It is meant for exploring your case, and we have a few recommendations that should help you get better results when using it. So, the first thing we recommend is to write your questions in plain English, avoiding figurative language and courtesy expressions. Additional words may interfere with the detection of relevant data for your reply. But yeah, it's still a language model, and if you can't help being polite and using metaphors, in many cases, BelkaGPT will figure out what you want. However, using plain language is still recommended. So we say plain English, but in fact, our language model knows other languages as well, as you have already seen in the demonstration. And though it knows them a bit worse, it can also detect and process text in these languages and answer your questions that you pose in these languages. So it supports English, French, German, Spanish, and Italian. So one more important recommendation when using BelkaGPT for your questions is to refer to device owners by their names, email addresses, chat nicknames, and so on. BelkaGPT is not aware that its knowledge base is data acquired from a device. It associates text with the names used in it. So you may need to look through the extracted artifacts and find the names and other IDs of the people of interest. So in this example, you can see that I asked it about the device owner first. So I asked whether he or she bought any luxury items. And it says that the given text data does not provide enough information about that. But when I used the name of the person who is the device owner, it could immediately find that there was a discussion of a product that GPT, there was a discussion of the product discussed Sorry. So it can find the discussion of a product, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it was bought. But still, it found some traces of luxury item. And it also considers something that costs 250 bucks as a luxury item. Yeah, it may be so. Then the next recommendation is to add context to your question if you know to where to look for the information. When processing your data, BelkaGPT considers the artifact types. For example, it tags it tags artifacts extracted from messengers as chat conversations and those from emails as mail conversations. And if you add these tags to a question, it increases the chances that BelkaGPT finds the most relevant artifact. You can also add specific dates if, like you see in the example. But BelkaGPT is not consistently good with them. However, you will get good results most of the time. As you may see, of course, there are also some limitations with our language model. Uh, it does not work ideally. For example, when analyzing a computer image that typically include multiple log documents, this large number of system documents may obscure the artifacts for BelkaGPT. That is why, so you can see here that I'm asking it about signs of phishing in email conversations, but it couldn't get to the emails because there were too many logs in its way that, of course, mentioned emails and maybe mentioned phishing, but it didn't get to the actual artifact that would contain relevant information. Um, that is why, if you get irrelevant answers that originate from such files, we recommend excluding the document artifacts from the analysis. For now, we are working on it and we will have better ways to handle it later. So, the next thing is the context. You know that large language models like ChatGPT often hold the context of the conversation and um, that allows you to not repeat your question every time, but just refer to the previous questions and answers of the large language model. So this is not the case for BelkaGPT currently, and that is why you cannot rely on the previous questions and answers when asking your question. You need to fully write out your question each time you ask something. So you can see here that I first asked it about if there were any attachments in the email. It found those attachments, but then I asked if they were sent in chat. So it thought I was talking with it about the events already and not uh, the attachment. So keep that in mind. Well, and the last one, which is not actually a limitation, but something you really need to know about BelkaGPT, is it may fail to detect data relevant to your question. In this case, it just states that no data was found. However, this reply does not mean that such data does not exist. It may be part of unsupported artifacts, or BelkaGPT may unsuccessfully interpret it. That is why, when working with it, you should always double check the negative result using other methods, like, of course, good old keyword search and filtering. So, one more thing to keep in mind is that BelkaGPT generates replies based on the three most relevant artifacts that it retrieves, but there may be other relevant artifacts in the case. Surely, after you get the clues from BelkaGPT, it will be easier to find advanced additional evidence. So, that was a pretty long story. But what's the conclusion? Large language models are a major development for implementing artificial intelligence in all industries. They build the bridge between AI possibilities and professionals because they allow professionals to set tasks and communicate using natural language instead of learning how to create complicated scripts. In tech industries like digital forensics and cyber incident response, the implementation of AI will happen faster. As you may see, it is already happening. And no, I won't take your job in the near future, but it will continue to evolve rapidly. And sooner or later, you will have to incorporate it into your workflow. Learning to use it sooner can give you both immediate and long-term advantages. AI accelerates your work. And if you begin exploring its possibilities now, you will faster have the necessary skills to embrace the industry's imminent AI transformation. BelkaGPT will evolve too. How? It will support more artifacts. It will have enhanced detection of relevant information. It will better understand the relationships between data and provide better explanations. And of course, whatever user feedback will suggest. So we encourage you to download Belkasoft X and try investigating your cases with the power of AI. And of course, share your stories with us. So this is it. This is all I wanted to share with you today. And if you have questions, let me know. Yeah. So would the Belk? Sorry. The question is, would the BelkaGPT store the inputted data locally and not be used for training? Jeffrey, thank you for the question. And the answer is yes. BelkaGPT processes all data locally. And so you can work with it in a totally offline environment, disconnected from the internet, because it is deployed on your machine. So it doesn't need to share data with the large language model. Can BelkaGPT use to aid reduce backlogs? Wow. Yeah, of course. BelkaGPT, thank you, Essel. BelkaGPT, of course, can reduce backlogs because it helps you get to the evidence faster. Like you can use keyword search and miss some information, or you can use BelkaGPT and find relevant information in a much more natural way. um, I have GPT. However, I do not see the Belka GPT under the advanced analysis options. Is GPT only allowed on certain devices? Hi, Sean. Yeah, this Belka GPT was released not so much time ago, and I think you just need to download the latest version of Belkasoft so you can see it. And another reason why you cannot see it is that when you install Belkasoft, you also need to download the files that will add Belka GPT functionalities in it. You can do it from your account on the Belka GPT, from your customer account on your Belkasoft website. Can Belka GPT generate targeted reports for export based on questions that were asked? Well, that's a very good. This is already an enhancement suggestion because no, for now, Belka GPT cannot generate reports. As I mentioned, its main function, its main prompt is to answer your questions based on text data extracted from the data source. And that is why you will have to wait until it can do so. How is it better as of now from results derived from multiple keywords? So it is that's a very good question because I cannot reply it. Like keyword search is bold. You have to create a list of keywords to look for, and you can work on it very, very thoroughly and maybe cover all the things related to the topic that you want to find out. But when using BelkaGPT, you do not need to spend your time on this. You just ask about a topic and it finds everything that is similar to the topic and it just renders it to you, explaining how it is relevant to your answer. So this is my answer. Is this a model you trained or fine-tuned? And what is it based on if it's fine-tuned? So Ryan, I'm sorry, I cannot disclose a lot of information about the years between BelkaGPT because it's like a know-how for now, and probably if we decide to share this information later, I will do it. So if BelkaGPT works offline, how Belkasoft continues to train it further without obtaining investigations artifact data? So Maxims, thank you for the question. So BelkaGPT works offline. Yeah, that is correct. And Belkasoft continues to improve how it recognizes data in a case. So it loads your case data and uses it for generating replies about your case locally. And Belkasoft will continue to enhance the model to better detect the information relevant to relevant to the questions asked. And it will not use any of your data for sure, because there is no way to, to obtain it from you unless you share it explicitly. So, how accurate is BelkaGPT to produce accurate results from the forensic data being examined? So, as I mentioned before, currently BelkaGPT has some inaccuracies and some limitations. It is good, but as I mentioned, you need to double check. If it says that it does not find the information, it it doesn't mean that this information is not available in the data source. And I would say that its main purpose is to give you the cues that would help you find additional information by reading the reference chats, just seeing who were contacted more, with who discussed some topics of interest, and things like that. So, but it is not accurate for now. Like, we cannot state that. So to what extent BelkaGPT has multilingual capabilities? Thank you for the question. And it supports few languages. So it knows English the best. Like it speaks English, it only speaks English. However, if you have data that is in French, German, Spanish, or Italian, in your case, it may also be able to find it, translate it, and use it for its replies, like if it finds relevant topics mentioned in text in those languages. That's it, I guess. Thanks all for coming. Really. And yeah, no, we encourage you to download our trial where you can already give BelkaGPT and try a try. Yeah. And of course, share your results, share your stories, like good results, bad results, because we are at the beginning and it is every feedback matters.
Thank you, Elena, for a great presentation. And thank you, everybody, for attending. Hope everybody has a great rest of your day and evening. We'll talk to you guys soon.
Thank you. Bye bye.